The Fable and Folly Network supports creators of exceptional audio stories, including the one you're listening to right now. If you love our shows, we want to hear from you. Complete our listener survey at fableandfolly.com/survey. This will help us learn more about you, what you like, what you'd like to hear more of, and how we can maintain an inclusive, safe atmosphere. As a thank you for your participation, we have extras and behind-the-scenes content from your favorite shows. Fans make the network what it is. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to hear from you. Find our listener survey at fableandfolly.com/survey today.
The barn. The barn is huge.
I can't think of any beautiful spaces right now.
And I can remember this 50-foot beam being delivered to the house one day, being delivered to the farm one day on this giant flatbed truck. And he pulls out this giant beam, and we have it to be the solid, backbone of the barn.
Including something we call overshadowing, which is essentially evoking a god to kind of wear you like a mask.
But I think one of the perspective of that I live in is this concept of things that are already and things that are not yet, and so.
And it's installed.
Because most of the time when people say, "Oh God, it is heaven and all is right with the world," it's sort of like this, and I will get there eventually.
And it's finished and it's beautiful. And it came
God
from
is
one solid
not
tree,
yet.
and
God
it's
is
just an
not
incredible piece
here.
of wood.
God is not yet over, and he lives in his own private Idaho, to which the rest of us are aspiring to grow one day. But the Gospels speak of the kingdom of God being
and
here,
I hope it lasts forever.
as well as
he built the barn to last 100
and it's
years.
that contradiction. So it's that blending, the understanding that we are called to be people of the kingdom inside of the world that we live in, as well as for whatever the world is to come.
Despite the fire, darkness clings to them. Despite the fire, shadows cling to the folds of their clothing. Despite the fire, shadows cling to the folds of their clothing.
A lot of the other buildings are starting to decay, mostly the roofs. The shingles, the cedar shingles, have moss on them.
And that's just by being, there's all these great things happening.
Soil,
my body is functioning in a certain way just to keep me
springtime,
alive.
everything gets covered in seeds, and if you don't clear that off, they turn into trees. And then you have trees growing through the roof, through the building itself, and you go inside and you can't access anything anymore. It's all water damaged and tree damaged, and this tree has taken back over what you've carved out. And it's happening to a lot of the buildings.
Being alive is a weight.
It's now been there for 20, 25 years.
But also it's
without the
so
constant upkeep of taking out those seedlings from the roof every spring, those roofs just go.
It doesn't take much to end. It doesn't take much to...
I'm terrified of my body. I don't recognize it. It feels like a thing that is foreign to me. It feels disconnected. It feels, I feel unattached.
There are great emotions and thoughts stirring within me, even though I'm not showing it.
I feel viscerally the idea that
makes
my
me feel like I
brain
don't
is
have to
piloting
do, spectacular things. That I'm already doing spectacular things just by being. And that's a very soothing thought for me.
A large open space, 2 stories, white stone, cement on the floors, cement walls.
And I
and
get
we
to a
decided
crossroads,
to take a lunch break and
the
walk
trail
this
goes
trail.
left,
And
it
we're
goes
walking
right.
this trail together, and it came to a
One
Y.
goes up a mountain,
And he said,
one
well, I'll
goes
take the
down.
high road, you take the low road.
And I get a
could've
sense I
been
need to
maybe
go up
9.
the mountain.
And I took the low road,
So
and I
I
kept
go,
going,
and
and my trail
I
got smaller and smaller and smaller until my trail
Don't
disappeared.
look at what the trail
And I kind
is,
of looked
or
around,
what the
and I was
trail
far enough from
pathway
him that I
is.
could not see
Kind of
him.
just
He
keep an
certainly
open
couldn't
mind.
see
So
me.
I
We
go
were probably
up-
more than a
I
mile
go up this
apart.
mountain,
And his trail kept going, and his
after
trail led
what
to
feels
an
like
end
maybe
point,
20
and mine
minutes,
completely stopped. So he walked all the way to the end
you
point,
know,
and I wasn't there,
I
and
start
then
to
walked
realize
all the way
I
back.
don't hear
And that took him
anything.
2 or 3 hours.
There's no wind.
It was a long trail for him,
There's no birds.
and mine was maybe 20
I don't
minutes.
even hear cars.
And
It's
so
just
I
you
sort
get
of stood at the end of my trail for a
traffic.
minute and couldn't
There's no
hear
other
him, couldn't
people.
see him. So I
hear
backtracked to the Y,
absolutely nothing.
and I stood there for about 20 minutes.
I start to realize
And I could still
might
see
be
the
in
van
another
from where we were parked, and I
place.
could see that Y.
So
I went back over to the van.
There are things on the wall. At first I think they are abstract pieces of metal. Then I notice a yoke. A fish casting metal. What looks like wolf skulls. I look at all the other pieces differently after that. I can't tell if they're just shapes. Are they naturally occurring? Were they put here for some reason? Do they have some practical use, like the yoke?
I am terrified of my body. I went to the doctor recently, and he looked at me and he said, "You are obese." He ran tests and said, "Has anyone ever told you that your cholesterol is incredibly high?" I'm hyper aware of how the blood flows through my heart, of how my breathing changes. I am terrified that I'll die. I have these visions of the blood flowing through my arteries and getting clogged and stuck, and or visions of clots getting dislodged and finding my brain. And there's this terrifying mundanity to it, because this is what happens as you get older. And I guess what, I'm 35, which both feels, like the beginning of having to acknowledge that, you're no longer 18. It's also not terribly old. I don't feel old. If I were to die tomorrow, people would say, "Oh God, he's so young."
There's one piece of art on the wall. It's a German painting of a little girl holding a pale umbrella in the spring rain. The colors are watercolor, and they mesh together and bleed together. And if you stand really far away from the painting, it looks like you're as detailed as when you're looking up close. And when you get close to the painting, you can't see the little girl at all.
A young man on an animal. It is captured. Bends its neck painfully. The wall, the man, the animal are all terribly artificial. There is a horror in the unreality, in the perfection of the buildings behind him, behind the wall.
I would probably say the lake. It's a place where I can feel small, and all the problems that I have going on kind of shrink away because I feel small. And so then
Only
the
eye
big
of
problems.
seems to say anything.
So I learned all these things alongside him, and so I can be 11 years old and helping him finish concrete, for the foundation of the house. And inside the house, we have this 3-story stone built by hand fireplace that he and I helped lay. And that's why I was carrying those 50-pound bags of concrete up and down ship's ladders. I helped him any way I could. And I wanted to prove that I could help him any way I could. He was so proud of that, too. He would have friends come over, and I would be finishing concrete or laying down something else or grabbing. And when I was born, measuring tape to go check something for him. He still kind of I was like an assistant, and I really loved that.
The problems that feel big in my head are also shrunk because I feel small. That makes sense.
But I got back to the van, and I sort of just hung out there for the 2 or 3 hours that it took him to walk the trail to and from.
I don't think I know nearly enough about these things.
I figured out where the sun was, and I figured out which way was north, and I made a little sundial to try to figure out what time it was, because I didn't have a watch on at the time. And I remember scolding myself that I didn't even have a watch on me to figure out anything. And I had my side pack, and in my side pack I had a pocket knife, and I had a couple snacks, and I had a couple bottles of water. And by 9, when backpacking with Dad, I knew what was going on. And it was a small pack with small things in it, but it was enough. And I had my compass to figure out what the sundial was. And I entertained myself by making this little sundial sitting next to our Volkswagen camper, waiting for him to come back with the car keys.
Just because I do not
It took a long time. I was
does not mean
surprised.
they do not have some greater purpose.
I poured out the cream and the honey on the rock and inside the hole in the tree.
I am in a gorgeous white room. Pillars reach to the ceiling. A crystal chandelier. There are paintings of bearded men along the walls.
But if God says, if what God says about their
Dressed in black.
world is that it's here, and this is what you have always, even in an eschatological setting. This is the new heaven and the new earth. It's just not here yet.
Maybe a quarter of a mile.
So I don't think it necessitates that there be some other realm in
But
which
you get to
God
the top of the hill,
exists.
and we
I
have a
think
house
that
in
the
the
more
barn.
we separate it,
There's this
the
path
further we
that
get
stretches back
the more
past
leniency we
several
give
other
ourselves on not having
shacks
to
that he's
perform
built,
our
machine
actions.
sheds that he's built, wood drying
there.
spaces that he's built,
It's
and it
sort of
finally
happening
spills you
two
out
states
into
over.
the garden and the vineyard
But
in the far back
if you
of the
think
lot.
theologically,
And we've had to carve out all the
narratively,
trees in order to make any
the
of this
kingdom
path.
of God being here already means that God is also here
And
already.
one of the first buildings that he did was this machine shed that's back there that has a rolling garage door that's solid wood. The sides are solid wood, and it's got beautiful cedar shingles.
At first, I think it was a normal city.
Like back in the day, my favorite place, favorite public bathroom was a place called Carol's
There's
Pub.
a large
It was a dive bar
king-size
in
bed
Uptown. They
once
just
housed
remodeled
a
it and
water
reopened
bed.
recently.
Now a mattress.
So they've lost kind of the edge
It's
that it used to
covered
have. But like
in a
I could write,
blue
poems and poems about this
and white
bathroom because
bedspread that my mother
they had a bar of
sewed
soap,
from hand.
which I thought was pretty gross for like this type of bar, especially.
In the corner,
it had one of
there's
those
a wicker
paper towel
hamper
dispensers that
laundry
kind of roll back
basket
into itself, which I don't know how
that's
those actually
circular
work,
in
but
shape
for some
and
reason
has a
it
lid.
struck me that it was just like recycling on itself
I've hidden in
because
that
they didn't seem
hamper
like the
a lot
type that
and
would
closed the
change
lid
out
on
whatever
myself.
needed to be changed. There was a
creaks every
stallless
time you move it.
toilet.
If you're hiding inside,
and
you
it wasn't
have
like
to
a
sit
bathroom that
perfectly
locked.
still.
So like if like somebody was just shitting on the can,
The bed is
anybody
raised.
could just walk in and just like wash their
There's a
hands
wooden
or
frame.
take a piss in the urinal.
I've hit my shins a lot on
it
that
was
frame.
it was all brick inside of it. There were pipes that were showing that probably shouldn't have been showing. It looked like a jail
Across
cell
from the
in
bed,
there,
is a
and I
wide
was just like,
dresser that's just
I
as
had the
wide as
fortune
the
of
bed.
living right next to the bar, so if I actually had
side
to
is
use the
all of
bathroom,
my
I could
mother's
just run
clothes.
home and then just
The other
appreciate
side
the
is all
bathroom.
of
So
my
I have
father's
like
clothes.
an outsider's like appreciation of it.
There is a river running through it out to a large body of water, red brick buildings. But as I stare at the buildings, I realize there are no right angles. They are all canted, somewhat nauseatingly, so that if you stand directly in front of them, they look normal. And the further off axis you get, the more strange. They are flattened. It seems almost cruel.
There's
I'm walking into the bathroom.
vineyard as well that's attached to the garden that's raised as well that had
The toilet seat's up. It hasn't been cleaned in ages.
6 or 7 red and
the walls
green
are
grapes.
yellow. The parts of the walls
I
that
think
aren't
we only ever got grapes
made
out
of
of
brick
one of them.
are yellow.
And even then the deer would
just
get in
from
and eat
years
it.
of
And I don't know
smoke,
how they would get past the electric fence, but they would.
and grime.
Everything mostly got past the electric fence. It was a pipe dream.
The
to
toilet,
hope that you
the
could
urinal has
carve
ice in
into
it.
the
It's one of
woods and
those.
not have disruption.
And
But we did get some produce, which was always
everything
awesome.
just has perspiration on it.
And we had apple trees, and we
the-
have pear trees.
There's a bar of
and we have
soap on the
nectarines,
sink,
and
and it looks like
walled in, fenced
nobody
in
uses the
berry
bar of soap.
patches with blueberries and strawberries,
And so it's just like aging
blackberries,
there, like
and
cheese.
3 beehives, Italian bees.
The mirror is cracked.
And some, 2 Italian bees. And I think one
And every
we
time
had
I
a
look
lot of
down the
trouble
sink,
raising bees.
I
We
remember
would
that my
usually
friend told me that
lose
there's
2
like a
out of
dime
3
bag of Coke
hives
in there.
and keep
Because
just
somebody
replenishing
had
them
dropped
every
it down
spring.
there and was
But
trying
there
to fish
weren't
it out
enough
with like
bees in
some
the
wire.
area to support
So whether
the
they got it or
amount
not, I
of
always imagine
produce
that there's
we
like
were
Coke
trying to
down
have
there.
flower and need to be pollinated.
There are 5 ships in the river, 4 with tall masts, 1 with 2 large wheels. A bridge spans the river. Like the buildings, none of the angles are right. This gallery is filled with pictures of a man. Small walls have been erected throughout, hanging from the ceiling. I dart around them when I think I see people. Of course, there are none. The man on the walls. The man on the walls has lived a broad life. In one, he is in chains. Here, he is speaking to a large crowd. His hand is raised. He acknowledges them. He is handsome.
I helped in just about every way. My dad was a industrial.
By the end, pictures of a coffin.
My dad is an industrial contractor.
His lips are
both
pursed.
commercial and industrial work, and so he could do the detailed cabinetry
He is staring
things.
at
He
something
could
or
do
someone.
a giant 500 square foot floor, whatever you want.
I want to read deepness or godhood onto this man. I do not think that would be appropriate.
That's a bit of you. And to lose all these buildings
He stands with another man smiling.
back to the woods is totally fair. It's still really hard to see.
Surrounding him, metal flanges reaching up towards his face. He is not afraid. I imagine he must be very afraid. Long live.
And in my opinion, like all of that would be
red is
meaninless if
heavily
that last part didn't
associated
happen.
With
So you could like pass the
Shango,
piece to whoever you
who
damn
is
well
kind of-
pleased.
He's considered the
And
kind of
if
warrior.
the communion
Friends,
section
yeah.
wasn't attached to it, it would be
And
pointless.
for me,
Raised
he is that exemplifier
Beautiful
of
carvings.
the warrior,
Flowers,
the
trees.
guardian, the
It's warm.
kind of chief strategist.
Warm, but it looks cared for.
The source of fire and source
started
of
with the
like
door.
blacksmithing and source of
The door
war.
is fake. The handle
So
is
that's
drawn on.
kind of the other side.
The windows are sketches. The lock is real.
The Fable and Folly Network, where fiction producers flourish.